My name is Clara Whitmore, and for 13 years, my family told people I had run away because I was unstable. That was the polite version. They said I had always been difficult, that I had rejected help, that my poor mother had cried herself sick after I disappeared into the rain. My father, Richard Whitmore, learned to lower his eyes at exactly the right moment when people asked about me. My mother, Diane, learned to press a tissue against the corner of her eye before a tear ever appeared. My younger sister, Brooke, learned the most important lesson of all. A beautiful lie, repeated calmly, can become a family history. They were good at it. They were so good that, last October, when the alumni office at Fairview State University invited me to speak at the opening of the Whitmore Family Education Center, they didn't even realize the keynote speaker was the daughter they had erased. The invitation arrived at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning while I was sitting in my office in Raleigh, North Carolina, eating a blueberry muffin over a stack of grant audits. The email subject line said, "Formal invitation, Whitmore Family Education Center dedication." My assistant had flagged it as possibly personal. I read the first paragraph twice before I understood what I was looking at. Fairview State University was dedicating a new student support center funded by a $1.8 million pledge from Richard and Diane Whitmore, my parents. The same parents who had put a 15-year-old girl out of their house in a storm because Brooke told them I was dangerous. The air conditioner above my office door clicked 3 times and went still. My coffee had gone cold in its paper cup. Outside the window, traffic moved along Hillsborough Street in that slow, tired way morning traffic always does, brake lights blooming red through a misty drizzle. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I did not close the laptop. I opened a spreadsheet. That is what people like me do when the past knocks. By then, I was 28 years old and executive director of Second Door Initiative, a nonprofit that gave emergency housing, legal aid, and college scholarships to teenagers removed from unsafe homes. We had started with 1 donor, 1 rented office, and 7 kids. By the morning that email arrived, we had helped 312 students across 4 states and administered $2,406,870 in scholarships. I knew how to read grant files, bank ledgers, custody reports, hospital invoices, state licensing forms, and tax returns. I knew the difference between an apology and a paper trail. There is always a paper trail. I downloaded the public pledge announcement first. The university had posted glossy photos. My father in a navy suit, my mother in pearls, Brooke in a cream cashmere coat, all 3 standing in front of a rendering of the future center. Under the photograph, the caption called them long-standing advocates for vulnerable youth. I stared at that phrase for a long time. Vulnerable youth. It sounded expensive, like something printed on thick stationery and handed out beside champagne. Then I noticed the name of the fund, the Brooke Whitmore Resilience Scholarship. I laughed once, very quietly. It was not a happy sound. Brooke had built a public identity around the night she destroyed my life. According to the university article, she had survived years of emotional intimidation from an unstable sibling, and her family's experience had inspired their commitment to mental health advocacy. The article did not name me. It didn't have to. In Fairview, South Carolina, old stories moved faster than weather warnings. Everyone knew there had been an older Whitmore daughter. Everyone knew something had happened. Nobody had ever asked me. 13 years earlier, I had been 15, wet to the bone, standing in the foyer of my parents' brick house, while thunder shook the windows hard enough to make the chandelier tremble. Brooke sat on the sofa with her knees tucked under her, sobbing into my mother's shoulder. My father stood by the fireplace with his jaw clenched, holding her phone like it was a weapon. "Tell us the truth," he said. I told it. That was my mistake. Brooke had created screenshots from a fake account using my name and profile picture. She said I had spread rumors about her at school, called her a cheater, mocked her for liking a boy named Mason, and pushed her hard enough to bruise her arm. She showed them the purple mark like evidence in court. I knew even then she had done it to herself. She had always been careful that way, always theatrical, but never sloppy. I said she was lying. My mother whispered, "Don't make it worse, Clara." My father's face changed when I said Brooke was jealous. Not angry exactly. Worse. Disgusted. As if the truth coming out of my mouth had a smell. "You are sick," he said. "Something inside you is wrong." Rain hammered the porch roof. The house smelled like lemon polish, wet wool, and the chicken casserole my mother had burned because Brooke had started crying at dinner. My backpack was upstairs. My phone had 9% battery. I remember those details because trauma records the small things with cruel precision. The large things are too much to hold, so the mind preserves the squeak of a stair tread, the taste of metal on your tongue, the sound of your father unlocking the front door. "Get out," he said. "I won't have a sick daughter in this house." My mother did not stop him. Brooke watched from behind her hands. She smiled. 3 hours later, Dr. Margaret Ellis hit me with her Volvo at the corner of Palmetto Road and East Wren, 1.7 miles from the bus station. The light was green for me. I know because the police report said so, not because I remember. I remember headlights, a horn, cold water in my mouth, and a woman's voice saying, "Sweetheart, stay with me." Margaret was Dean of Graduate Studies at Fairview State. She had visited my biology class the week before and told me not to let anyone dim my light. She drove behind the ambulance, stayed at the hospital, and called social services when my parents tried to take me home without answering why I had been walking alone in a storm. My father argued. My mother cried. Brooke said I was manipulating everyone. Margaret listened to all of them. Then she asked the nurse for a pen. That was the first time I saw a calm woman become dangerous. The investigation that followed did not send my parents to prison. Families like mine rarely collapse all at once. They hire attorneys. They blame stress. They say things were misunderstood. My parents agreed to temporary placement, then permanent placement, then silence. They paid for nothing. They visited twice. The second visit ended when Brooke told the caseworker she was afraid to be in the same room with me. Margaret took me in. She did not do it dramatically. She did not call herself my savior. She gave me the guest room, a gray blanket, a desk lamp, and a rule. In her house, truth would not be punished. I slept for 14 hours the first night. When I woke up, the room smelled like toast and cedarwood, and there was a clean sweatshirt folded at the foot of the bed. That was how my second life began. For 13 years, I worked. I studied, documented, verified, filed, and built a world no one in my old house could enter. I graduated early, earned a full scholarship, completed a master's in public policy, and learned the quiet machinery of institutions. I learned that cruelty hides in informal arrangements, but accountability lives in forms, dates, signatures, timestamps, and sworn statements. I learned that people who rely on emotional fog become terrified when someone turns on fluorescent lights. So when Fairview State invited me to honor the Whitmore family, I did not reply right away. First, I audited the fog. The university's public database showed that the Whitmore Pledge had been announced as $1.8 million over 5 years, but only $240,000 had been transferred. The rest was listed as secured through related philanthropic vehicles. That phrase was ugly. I had seen it before in nonprofit fraud cases. It usually meant money had been promised twice, counted 3 times, and moved through an entity with a patriotic name. In this case, the entity was Brooks Foundation, Resilient Futures America. I pulled its IRS Form 990 filings. The first year looked clean enough. $420,000 in donations, $61,000 in program services, $118,000 in administrative expenses, and the rest supposedly restricted for scholarships. The second year was worse. The foundation reported $706,000 in donations and only $38,500 in scholarships. Brooks' consulting fee was $96,000. My mother received $42,000 as event coordinator. My father's real estate company charged $87,400 for facility planning services, even though the center had not been built. I sat back in my chair. There it was. The smell in my office changed as the coffee cooled. Burnt paper, old carpet, rain through the cracked window. My assistant, Jenna, knocked once and leaned in. "You okay?" "Yes," I said. That was not the whole truth, but it was enough. Over the next 17 days, I built what Margaret always called a red binder. Not metaphorically. I bought a 3-inch red D-ring binder from an office supply store in Cary, labeled the spine Whitmore, Resilient Futures, source file, and began filling it with copies. Public tax filings, donor brochures, state corporate registrations, university pledge language, archived web pages, screenshots with timestamps, vendor invoices from Brooks Gala at the Magnolia Club, the invoice for $18,600 in floral installations, the $11,240 champagne bill coded as Youth Outreach Hospitality, the $9,875 photographer fee for a scholarship campaign featuring Brooke in soft lighting beside children whose names were not listed anywhere in the program files. Then came the identity theft. It was small at first, almost invisible. A scholarship application in my name from 12 years earlier. I found it in an old university archive by accident while searching for Brooks Foundation documents. It listed me as a former participant in a family reunification counseling program sponsored by my parents. The signature at the bottom was supposed to be mine. It was not. The application had been used to secure a $25,000 youth recovery grant from a federal pass-through fund in 2014. My name, my childhood records, my fabricated consent, my fabricated diagnosis. My parents had not only abandoned me, they had turned my abandonment into funding. I remember standing in the copy room with the paper shaking in my hand while the machine hummed and spat out duplicate pages. The toner smelled sharp and chemical. Somewhere down the hall, Jenna was laughing at something on the phone. Life kept moving with offensive normalcy. I placed the forged application into the red binder behind a tab labeled Federal. Then I called Margaret. She answered on the second ring. "Clara?" "I found something." "How bad?" "Federal grant bad." The silence on her end lasted 4 seconds. Margaret never wasted silence. "Make 3 copies," she said. "One for your attorney, one for the inspector general, and one for the room where they think they're safe." I loved her for that. My attorney, Naomi Price, did not smile when she read the documents. Naomi had silver hair, tortoiseshell glasses, and the kind of stillness that made nervous people confess things just to fill the air. Her office smelled like black tea and beeswax. She turned each page with a ruler aligned to the bottom margin, as if disorder offended her personally. "This is fraud," she said. "Yes." "This is also defamation if they used your alleged instability to raise money." "Yes. And if the grant involved federal pass-through funds, the Inspector General will care." "Yes." Naomi looked up. "You are very calm." "I had 13 years. That was true. I accepted the Keynote invitation at 4:32 that afternoon. My reply was short and gracious. I said I was honored to speak about student resilience, institutional accountability, and what vulnerable youth actually need from adults. The alumni office responded within 12 minutes, delighted. They attached the program. My father would give opening remarks. Brooke would introduce the scholarship. My mother would unveil the donor plaque. I would speak last. Perfect. A public stage is only dangerous to the person who forgets it has lights. 2 days before the dedication, Brooke emailed me personally. She did not know it was me at first. My professional name was Clara Ellis Whitmore. I had added Margaret's last name legally when I turned 21, not to replace myself, but to honor the woman who stayed. Brooke's message began with fake warmth and ended with a demand. She wrote that the Whitmore family preferred the keynote, "Remain uplifting," and avoid unnecessary references to family trauma. She attached a suggested introduction describing me as a beneficiary of intervention-based family support services. I stared at that sentence until it became almost funny. Then I replied, "Dear Ms. Whitmore, thank you for the guidance. I will keep my remarks factual, documented, and appropriate to the occasion." She sent back a smiley face. People like Brooke mistake manners for surrender. On the morning of the dedication, Fairview smelled exactly the way I remembered: wet pine, cafeteria grease, and old brick warming under weak sunlight. The campus had expanded, but the sidewalk still sloped toward the science building where Margaret had first handed me her car. I wore a dark green dress, low heels, and a camel coat. In my left hand, I carried the red binder. In my right, a leather folder with my speech. Margaret met me outside the auditorium at 9:06. She was 71 then, hair white at the temples, posture still military straight despite never having served a day. She adjusted my collar the way she had before my first scholarship interview. "You can leave right now," she said. "You owe them nothing." "I know. And if you go in, you do not have to forgive anyone." "I know that too." She studied my face. "Then go be precise." The auditorium was full by 9:30. Donors in wool coats, faculty in academic regalia, students holding programs printed on ivory cardstock, a local news camera near the back. My parents sat in the front row beside Brooke. My father looked older, but still expensive. Gray suit, gold watch, polished shoes. My mother's pearls were larger than I remembered. Brooke was 32, blonde, beautiful, and arranged in her chair like a portrait of innocent suffering. She saw me when the provost walked me toward the stage. At first, her smile remained in place. Then it failed. Recognition is a physical event. It drains color from the mouth first, then stiffens the shoulders, then teaches the eyes fear. Brooke gripped the edge of her program so tightly the paper bent. My mother followed her gaze and saw me. My father turned last. His hands began to shake. Not much, enough. The provost introduced my father, and Richard Whitmore walked to the podium like a man stepping onto ice. He spoke about duty, family, and the moral obligation to care for young people in crisis. His voice was steady by the second paragraph. That impressed me. He had always recovered quickly when applause was available. My mother unveiled the donor plaque next. It was brushed bronze, mounted on a walnut base. The engraving read, "The Whitmore Family Education Center, built in honor of Brooke Whitmore and all young people who find the courage to heal." Cameras clicked. Brooke dabbed her eyes. The room applauded. I wrote one note in the margin of my speech. All young people. Then Brooke stood. She walked to the podium with that careful fragility she had perfected before she was 12. She thanked her parents for believing her when telling the truth was painful. She said some wounds are invisible. She said some families are tested by a child who refuses help. She did not name me, but she looked directly at me when she said it. That was her final mistake, because the university president, the provost, 3 trustees, 2 reporters, and 417 guests were now witnesses. When they called my name, the applause was polite. Confused, but polite. I placed my speech on the podium. I set the red binder beside it. The microphone smelled faintly metallic. The stage lights were warm against my face. Somewhere in the ceiling, an old vent rattled like coins in a drawer. I looked at the front row. Then I began. 13 years ago, on October 18, 2013, at approximately 8:27 p.m., a 15-year-old girl was ordered out of her family home during a severe thunderstorm. The room changed immediately. Not loudly, completely. She was accused of being unstable, cruel, and dangerous because her younger sister produced fabricated screenshots, a self-inflicted bruise, and a story their parents chose not to question. At 11:42 p.m., that girl was struck by a vehicle at the intersection of Palmetto Road and East Wren. The police report states that the pedestrian signal was active. The hospital intake report states that she arrived with a concussion, hypothermia, and bruising along the left shoulder and ribs. The social worker's notes state that the parents described the incident as a discipline issue. My father's lips parted. My mother closed her eyes. Brooke whispered, "No." I turned one page. That girl was me. No one moved. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse them with adjectives. I used dates, forms, case numbers, and words already written by professionals who had no reason to lie for me. I told them about the placement hearing. I told them about Margaret Ellis, who was sitting in the third row with her hands folded in her lap. I told them what safe adults do. They do not need perfect children before they offer shelter. They do not require a minor to win a debate before unlocking a door. Then I opened the red binder. The reason I agreed to speak today is not revenge, I said. Revenge is emotional. This is an audit. A sound moved through the audience, low and sharp. I lifted the first document. Resilient Futures America, the foundation associated with today's scholarship, reported $706,000 in donations last year. It reported $38,500 in direct scholarships. It paid $96,000 in consulting fees to Brooke Whitmore, $42,000 in event coordination fees to Diane Whitmore, and $87,400 in facility planning fees to a company owned by Richard Whitmore. The university president leaned toward the provost. I placed the document down. Those numbers are public. Then I lifted the forged application. This one was not. Brooke stood halfway up. Stop! Security shifted near the wall. I looked at her for 1 second. Sit down, Brooke. She sat. The document in my hand is a 2014 federal pass-through grant application submitted using my name, my childhood history, and a signature that is not mine. It describes me as a participant in a family recovery program I never attended. It was used to obtain $25,000 in restricted funds. I have provided copies to council, the university, and the Office of Inspector General. My father gripped the armrest. The bronze donor plaque caught the stage light and shone like a verdict. I am not asking this university to believe my feelings, I said. I am asking it to review documents. That was when the side doors opened. Naomi had told me the Inspector General's office might not move before the ceremony. She was wrong. 2 investigators entered with campus police and a state charity bureau official. They did not rush. They did not need to. Authority has its own weather. The first investigator, a woman in a navy blazer, walked to the front row and spoke quietly to my father. The second handed an envelope to the university president. Brooke began crying. This time, nobody moved to comfort her. The president returned to the microphone after a conversation that lasted exactly 2 minutes and 46 seconds. His face had gone pale beneath the stage lights. He announced that the university was suspending the dedication, freezing all associated scholarship funds pending investigation, and removing the Whitmore name from the center until the review was complete. There are silences that feel empty. This one had weight. My father tried to stand with dignity, but his knees betrayed him. My mother kept saying, "Richard, tell them!" Brooke kept repeating that I had planned this because I hated her. The investigator asked her to lower her voice. She did not. Then she said the sentence that ended the performance. She was always crazy. We used what we had to protect the family. Naomi, standing near the aisle, closed her eyes for half a second. A reporter's camera was still recording. Federal investigations do not resolve in a single dramatic afternoon. Real consequences arrive by certified mail, scheduled interviews, subpoenas, revised filings, frozen accounts, and attorneys who stop returning casual calls. But the first collapse happened right there, in that auditorium, under a banner that still said, "Courage to Heal." By December, Resilient Futures America had lost its charitable registration in South Carolina. By February, the university had returned restricted donations and renamed the building the Ellis Student Safety Center after Margaret, though she argued against it for 3 straight weeks. By April, Brooke had resigned from 2 nonprofit boards and quietly moved out of her downtown apartment after donors sued to recover misused funds. My mother's event business closed when 3 clients canceled in the same week. My father's company became the subject of a tax review related to improper deductions tied to the foundation. The criminal case took longer. It always does. In the end, Brooke pleaded guilty to 1 count involving false statements connected to charitable filings. My parents entered civil settlements and paid restitution they could not comfortably afford. Their house on Calhoun Ridge sold for $612,000, nearly $90,000 under asking, because everyone in Fairview knew why it was listed. The pearls disappeared first, then the club membership, then the Christmas cards with embossed gold initials. I did not attend the plea hearing. Margaret did. She said Brooke looked smaller without an audience. My father wrote me a letter in May, 8 pages, handwritten on cream stationery. He said he had failed me. He said he had wanted so badly to believe Brooke was fragile, and I was strong, that he confused strength with disposability. He said he now understood that throwing me into the storm was not discipline. It was abandonment. My mother added a note at the end, saying she was sorry she turned away. I read both. Then I filed them. Some apologies are evidence of growth. Some are only receipts for damage already done. I was not cruel in my reply. I was not warm either. I wrote that I hoped they continued therapy, paid every dollar ordered, and told the truth when asked why their older daughter no longer attended family events. I did not say I forgave them. I had not. There was one more meeting before the final settlement, and I include it because people often imagine justice as one clean swing of a hammer. It is not. Justice is a conference room at 8:15 in the morning with bad coffee, beige carpet, and a printer that jams every time someone needs a copy. Justice is your former father sitting across a table from you while his attorney whispers into his ear, and your own attorney places a clean legal pad in front of you like a shield. Justice is realizing that the person who once controlled the thermostat, the dinner table, the holidays, and your right to come home is now afraid of a woman billing in 6-minute increments. The mediation office was on the 4th floor of a building near the federal courthouse in Columbia. Rain tapped against the windows, soft and patient. My father wore a charcoal suit I recognized from old Christmas photographs. My mother wore no pearls. Brooke did not look at me at all. She stared at her manicure, which was chipped on the thumb. Their attorney began with regret. Naomi stopped him before the second sentence. "We are not here for theater." I placed a thin folder on the table. Not the red binder. That stayed with the investigators. This folder contained only what mattered for settlement. The forged signature analysis, the financial tracing summary, the hospital report, the social worker's note, and the donor prospectus using Brooke's fabricated victim story. 5 documents. Clean copies. No emotion. My father looked at them like they were photographs of a crime scene. In a way, they were. The mediator asked whether I wanted to make a personal statement. My mother lifted her head then, just slightly, as if some part of her still expected the old Clara to beg to be understood. I could almost see the script she wanted. Tears, forgiveness, a trembling reunion, the kind of ending that would let her tell people we had all healed privately. I had no interest in giving her a usable scene. "I want 3 things," I said. "Full restitution to the affected funds, written correction to every donor and institution that received false statements about me, and a permanent non-disparagement clause with liquidated damages of $10,000 per violation." Brooke scoffed. "You're insane!" Naomi turned one page. That would be violation 1 if the agreement were already signed. The room went quiet. My father rubbed both hands over his face. That was when I saw it. Not remorse exactly, not yet, but recognition. The man who once believed money could soften every edge of the law was learning that documents do not care who hosted Thanksgiving. My mother started crying silently. I watched the tears fall onto her blouse and felt no triumph. That surprised me. For years, I had imagined that their humiliation would feel like warmth. It did not. It felt like setting down a suitcase I had carried so long my hand had gone numb around the handle. The relief was real, but it was not sweet. It was clean. By noon, the framework was signed. By 12:17, I was outside under the courthouse awning, breathing air that smelled like wet concrete and exhaust. Margaret stood beside me, holding 2 paper cups of coffee from the kiosk across the street. She handed me one without asking. "You were very restrained," she said. "I wanted to be cruel." "I know." "I could have been." "Yes." I looked at the courthouse steps, at lawyers moving in and out with umbrellas and leather bags, at a young mother tying her child's shoe near the metal detector line. Why wasn't I? Margaret thought for a moment. Because cruelty is still a conversation with them. You chose policy. That made me smile. Only a little. That afternoon, I went back to my hotel and slept for 11 hours. No dreams, no storm, no hallway. Just sleep, heavy and uninterrupted, the kind your body gives you only after it understands the door is locked and no one dangerous has a key. The following October, exactly 13 years and 11 months after the storm, I stood in the lobby of the Ellis Student Safety Center while the first group of emergency scholarship students arrived for orientation. The building smelled like fresh paint, coffee, and raincoats drying on hooks near the door. A girl named Mariah stood by the window, clutching a folder to her chest. She was 16, quiet, brilliant, and terrified of needing anything. I recognized that posture. I walked over and handed her a key card. "Room 214 is yours," I said. "No one can take it from you." Her eyes filled. Mine did not. Not because I felt nothing, but because I had already turned the grief into architecture, into locked doors that opened from the inside, into emergency funds with 2 signature controls, into scholarship contracts no parent could steal, into a center where no child would be told to become smaller so someone else could remain innocent. That is what survival became for me. Not forgiveness, infrastructure. People ask whether exposing my family healed me. The answer is no. Healing had started long before they lost their reputations. It started in Margaret's guest room with a gray blanket and a desk lamp. It continued every time someone believed a document over a performance. It grew each time I chose boundaries without offering a courtroom speech to justify them. What the auditorium gave me was not healing. It gave me correction. For 13 years, my family told the world I was the storm. They said I was unstable, dangerous, dramatic, impossible to love safely. But storms do not keep records. Storms do not file grant complaints, preserve metadata, call auditors, protect children, and build centers with doors that lock. I was never the storm. I was the witness. And witnesses eventually speak. So, if you have ever been the child who was blamed because you were quieter, stronger, easier to sacrifice, I want you to hear me clearly. Being the reliable one does not make you disposable. Being calm does not mean the pain did not happen. Being willing to leave does not mean you stopped loving them. Sometimes it means you finally started loving yourself with the seriousness everyone else demanded from you but never returned. Blood does not create family. Loyalty does. If this story reached you, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. And if you believe every child deserves at least one adult who opens the door instead of locking it, subscribe to the channel and stay for the next story.